Welcome to Vendetta Sports Media. This is Eight Sided Freaks. We are back after a couple weeks off, some holidays, a week off from fights. So we're back, and we're coming back at a perfect time because we've got a pay-per-view and a fairly good one. We've got some great fights. We've got a title fight. We've got a number one contender fight, and the remainder of the card isn't, star-studded, but a pretty solid amount of quality fights. There aren't very many fights that are just like, this fight's crap. Don't even want to look at it. For the whole fight card, top to bottom, a lot of pretty good fights, and a lot of very entertaining fights that look to be exciting. So it's a good combination for a card. Main event, we've got Alexandre Pantoja taking on the UFC debutant Kai Asakura. Then the other big, massive fight, Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Garry. So those are at the top of the bill, and today we will take care of those. First, as we usually do, we're going to start at the top of this pay-per-view preview and work our way down. We're going to switch it up a little bit. We're going to do the top three fights on the card, and then we're going to talk about Sterling Evloev, and then we're going to hit some final thoughts. So that's the approach that we're going to take. Try and hit the more important fights and still leave us some time for a little bit of a longer final thoughts section because, like I said, a lot of fights that can be touched on in even if it's a smaller capacity, fights that should be at least mentioned. So that is the plan for today. And like I said, we are taking it straight from the top. Alexandre Pantoja, Kai Asakura. Jerry, we can swing it over to you first. What are your thoughts on Kai Asakura coming into the UFC, getting a title fight, and it being against Alexandre Pantoja, who has now got a couple title defenses under his belt and looking to continue on with his title reign here?
I mean, I think that's a big part of it is he does have a couple defenses under his belt already. That's why we're seeing a guy in Kai Asakura come in, and in his first UFC fight, he's getting the title shot. Sure, he was a risen champion. He was a Grand Prix champion in 2021, or he lost in the final. He's been a title holder in that promotion multiple times. So he does have big fight experience. Hasn't fought in just under a year, which does concern me a little, but he's more of a knockout guy. And that's a whole nother thing. Like Pantoja has just been dominating these guys by decisions. Won the belt over Brandon Moreno by decision, then defended against Royval and Steve Urseg. Nothing against those guys, but at times they're not as much of strong stand-up guys as maybe Asakura will be. I was kind of hoping we'd see a Kai Kara France for that same sort of reason, or even now like Tatsuro Taira's getting a little better, Asuam Lambayev, all these other guys. I think it's the fact that there's not a legitimate number one contender in this division where I'm like, oh, Kai Asakura comes in. If he wins, what a signing. If not, have a matchup against some of these other top guys, and we'll see how he stands at the best of the UFC.
Yeah, I know it's always going to be a little, debatable whether that someone should get a title shot on their first fight or in their debut. But I know the UFC really wants to break into the Japanese market, especially with the way it's excelling across multiple divisions right now. Um, so I do get it. And then, like you said, I think I was looking it up. I don't know the exact amount of fights he had there in Risen, but he had 10 knockouts. So at least he is entertaining. I will be honest, I've never caught a full fight from him, but obviously he's been pretty popular, I would say, at least in the MMA side of things. And so, you see a lot of highlights or clips from him too before. But I think, if there was one with the way the UFC wants to get into the Japanese market stuff, I think it makes sense that he gets an immediate debut title fight. I think he's an entertaining fighter, and Pantoja, like you said, has been doing his job, continually getting these title defenses. So I think this one, at least compared to a couple of the other people he fought, this is going to be definitely the one that people should be most excited for or hyped up for, just because of the level of unknown happening as well in this fight.
Yeah, and I agree with a lot of what you guys said, and I think it's part of this is, Pantoja's defended the belt multiple times, and you're looking at guys at the top of that division in Royval and Moreno. He's beat both of them I believe he's beat both of them multiple times. And those guys, Moreno and Royval, both went out there and had pretty good performances against guys who were being built as future title contenders in Tyra, in Amir Albazi. So when you've got those guys who Moreno's already beat, Pantoja's already beat multiple times, makes it a little bit harder to find a title challenger. And they could have went with Kai Kara-France. I don't think that would have been a crazy decision by any means. And I don't think a Royval fight, again, after what he did with Tyra, would have been a bad decision either. But this is, you have Kai Asakura, who is entertaining, is an appealing name in that Asian market and specifically the Japanese market, which they're obviously trying to break into. They had a show in China a couple weeks ago. So Asia as a whole is a big market that the UFC is trying to break into. So it makes sense. And I think it's, I don't want to call it a no-lose situation, but I think in a worst-case scenario, if you have Asakura's UFC debut and he loses, and now you have guys like Moreno, like Royval, like Kai Kara-France, like all those guys can't fight for the title next. So one of them gets to fight Asakura, and he's coming in with a clean slate. When a lot of these guys at the top of 125 have fought each other. So it's very, very, very useful to have a guy right there in the top 5 that has fought none of these guys. So the signing makes sense. I think it will be a good signing in the long term. Will it result in the title right away? Maybe, maybe not. But I think in the long term, you're going to get a handful of good fights out of Asakura. And he seems to be a guy who is going to try and sell fights. He seems like a cool guy. Seen some clips this week where he's doing some solid work on the mic, on the promotional side. Nothing earth-shattering. But for the flyweight division, you're not really going to get earth-shattering. So I think overall, a lot of promising things for the Kai Asakura side. And as far as Pantoja goes, he's probably excited to get a fresh face rather than someone he's already beat. So for him, that aspect of it is probably an appealing factor as well.
Yeah, I just want to bounce off what you were just saying, James. I asked Asakura on his mic work. I don't know if you guys have watched the UFC Embedded series this week. He seems like a very entertaining character from the clips I've seen. Pretty much said he was having a cheat meal on the first episode after he already made his target weight. So he does things differently, and I think that'll be fun because doing some research, and Alexandre Pantoja already has the third longest title defense in his division, in the flyweight division. He's beating guys over and over again. Obviously, the two ahead of him, Henry Cejudo, who defended once and kind of held the belt for a while until he had to vacate it and move up, and then Mighty Mouse, who we know held it for like 2,000 days or something ridiculous. But now he's getting these other guys. So it is like if Asakura comes in and gets the win, props to him. But if not, this just kind of keeps it going. This is his third. We all talk about Alex Pereira, how he's had 3 title defenses this year in 2024. This will be Pantoja's third title defense in less than 365 days. So he's out there fighting just as often, and that's something that I want to just give a shout out to him for being this active and fighting this consistently as a champion of a division that we've talked on episodes in the past of flyweight division might be falling apart. It's just being these guys. We have no young and up-and-comers, and that's a big thing that Asakura can bring to it is he's a fresh face, new guy to the UFC, maybe bringing over more other guys in the future.
That is a great point, though. I think probably because it is flyweight, but and maybe he's just, it's hard to be Alex Pereira levels of entertaining, sure, but he should get a lot more props and respect for the how active he's being, and he's still winning, and he's winning pretty, convincingly in those last 2. So I think Pantoja should get more respect, and I guess, like you said, in a division that's been struggling, it's probably the media's job and stuff like that to even promote that more and kind of show that the fighters there, and specifically the champion, they are trying to help make that division entertaining and stuff. So.
Yeah, and Pantoja himself has, these fights have been good fights. The Moreno fight, the one he won the belt in, was touted as one of the better fights of that year. I don't think it won fight of the year or anything quite like that, but it was, in consideration at least, we'll say that Moreno-Pantoja fight, that was a great fight. And then that's one that you'd typically sit out from. He didn't sit out. The Royval fight was a little bit of on the calmer side for him. But he, is going out there and exposing a Royval weakness. And then he goes out there against Usyk, and that Usyk fight was not particularly a barn burner either, but that was a solid fight. Like, it's not like it was a bad fight. It wasn't earth-shattering, but it was a solid fight. And he took some damage in that one. So these are also fights that he's taking damage in and returning in. It's not like he's, Pereira for, a lot of the work that he's done is like, it's easier to return when you knock out Jamal Hill in the first round. And not to say it's all, a walk in the park to do that in return, but it is a little bit easier than going 5 rounds. So there's, some credit there for Pantoja in those types of things that he's doing. So, now looking at this from a fight perspective, I think it's an interesting fight. I'll start with the betting odds here. Odds have it a Pantoja favorite, and he is minus 280. Looks like a solid average on the favorite. And then a plus 210 comeback. So he's not, an outrageous favorite. There's some outrageous favorites on this card, north of minus 500. But not Pantoja. He's a sizable favorite, but nothing crazy. And I think this is an interesting fight because we've seen Pantoja fights recently go to decision, like we just mentioned. But prior to his title run, a lot of these Pantoja fights are ending inside 2. Kai Asakura, like we mentioned earlier, has been knocking guys out. So 2 guys who, if you look at their career as a whole, tend to be on the finishing side of things more often than the decision. We've just had, Pantoja go to decision a little bit more often now that he's in these title fights. So I think it's one that should result in some violence. Before we get into skills or anything like that, I do want to get a thought from you guys on some things that I'm not sure how much are being talked about is the transition from Ryzen to the UFC. So Asakura is going from fighting in the ring to in the octagon. Thankfully, he was fighting no shoes in the ring. Some guys have had to make the transition from wearing shoes to no shoes. That's a lot harder. So he's got it a little bit easier on that regard. But do you guys hold weight at all in transitioning from the ring and then the ropes versus the octagon shape and the cage? Anthony, we can swing it over to you to start this one.
Yeah, I do. I think it does hold weight. It's just a different type of ring craft. Obviously, it's a different shape. But, when it comes to, so just knowing when you're close to the fence and or close to the ropes, it's obviously it's going to be similar to, because at the end of the day, it's just essentially a boundary. So when it comes to evasion and footwork, you cannot move back, obviously, because there's a boundary there. So that's when you have to escape right, escape left, changes the footwork. I'd say the type, like maybe head movement and stuff is a little easier, like when you're bouncing, because the ropes give you a little more space compared to a fence. You're obviously not allowed to do that. So I do think, yes, there is a difference, although there are similarities and stuff. So it shouldn't be like a complete foreign concept. But I do think, like with anything, a ring compared to an octagon, the ropes compared to the fence, there will be, not saying he'll figure this out in one fight or through training camp, but I think just in general, when it comes to it, I'm sure there will be a little bit of a difference, obviously.
Yeah, I'm curious. Is it similar to how the one ring is? Is this the same sort of style where it's like almost like a box? It is pretty much a boxing ring. Is that what it was? Okay, that's what I thought, but it's definitely different. It's like what you're saying, Anthony. What's more, when you get backed up against the cage now, you don't have that kind of like slack where you can sort of use the ropes as to your advantage and kind of duck around them and kind of place your body on that. You're pretty much just being held up there. You need to start doing stuff yourself to get out of there. The other thing that I'm curious about as far as the transition from Ryzen to UFC, obviously the skill level is a big jump up, I would assume, for Asakura. I can't say I've watched much Ryzen in the past, but it's also the fact that the decisions and the fights that he's been in, the longest fight he's been in was 3 3 5-minute rounds. It isn't like they are having a 5-minute fight. And I think that's something that or a 5-round fight. And that's something that could massively benefit Pantoja and hurt Asakura in this situation. Maybe his stamina is not there for 5 rounds. And like we were talking earlier, we've seen Pantoja as the champion go to decision, finish 5 rounds and still keep looking good. So that's something I'm more concerned than necessarily the octagon versus ring shape. At times is more how he can manage the time and manage his energy. Because as you said earlier, I think James, I guess you both were, we were talking about the knockouts that he has and how he kind of goes in quickly. If he can't get Pantoja down and out, could be in for a long night.
Yeah, and at the start of this, to bounce off on the cardio aspect of things, on the start of Pantoja's title run, I was very concerned with the cardio. And not to say he's got great cardio, but going into the Moreno fight, I picked Moreno, and then I actually turned around and picked Royval again in both those first 2 fights. Then I had Pantoja against Usyk. But the point of this is the first 2 times I picked against Pantoja because I just wasn't sold on the cardio aspect of things. For example, in the first Brandon Royval fight, I thought Pantoja was pretty close to just gassing out after fighting so insane for a round and a half. And I thought he was going to gas out in the first fight. And then he ends up getting the rear naked choke. I believe it was a rear naked choke. But point being, it looked like he was going to gas out after a round and a half. And I thought, well, there's no way he can hold that pace for 5 rounds. And he did. So I've been impressed with his ability to kind of transition his 3-round game into a 5-round game. I think he's done well in that, and that's just something that Kai Asakura hasn't been assigned with yet. He hasn't had to do that yet. Maybe he does it great. Maybe he's not good at it at all. And same thing can be said for fighting in an octagon. There's a big difference in footwork, and finding yourself in a corner of a ring is a lot different than trying to evade and circle the way in an octagon. They're very different shapes, obviously, and it's probably easier to manage space in that octagon, at least a little bit. And the thing that I am highly concerned about in this matchup, though, is the cage grappling. Because Pantoja is one of the best in the sport, especially at 125 pounds and grappling in general, but he has solid takedowns and insane back takes and insane jiu-jitsu. So, like, if Kai is giving up space and getting to the fence and then having Pantoja shoot while he's up against the fence, like, how does he go, or how does he work on defending these takedowns up against the fence, which obviously he's doing in the training room? It's not like I'm sure he's not, completely ignoring that, but it's different when you're in there with Pantoja, and one slip up means he takes your back. And he's one of the best at landing the rear naked choke once he takes your back. So to me, that's kind of the most concerning thing about the new surface that he's working with here. And also, as we look at who we think is going to win this fight, that's one of the other things that's concerning is just grappling defense as a whole. I don't think he's a bad grappler, but like I just said, it's one mistake against Pantoja can be the end of your night. Even if he hasn't submitted Usyk, hasn't submitted Moreno, hasn't submitted Royval, those 3 guys are also very, very good defensive grapplers. Moreno, elite defensive grappler. Royval is good at certain things. He just laid on his back too long in that fight, which doesn't really give up the rear naked choke. And Usyk knew not to give up his back and was going to lay on his back rather than allow him to take the back. So that to me is kind of the concern for Kai Asakura as skills and kind of the current surface he's working with.
I do want to say there's just one other thing that I've kind of been doing a little bit of research into in the last 30 seconds. Well, you were saying that, but the rule difference, because like you look at Ryzen has a very different rule standpoint as well. A lot more is allowed in Ryzen than it is the UFC. Do you think that could have any impact on him moving over? Like he might forget a rule or not be used to the UFC stricter rules, because pretty much all ground strikes are legal to a downed opponent in Ryzen. You can do soccer kicks. He's got a couple of those knockouts there. You can do 12-6, which you can now do in the UFC as well. How do you think the rules are going to affect him, if you think they do, both of you?
You could go.
I'd say they're probably not. They're not good for him. I'll just say that. Like he'd be better off here if he could kick Pantoja in the head while he's on the ground. Because, I think there's a little bit of trying to rein things in where maybe you don't rein it in enough and you foul, or maybe you rein it in too much and you're not aggressive as you should be. Like, how natural has that become for fighting in a place where I think he's got over 20 fights on his record, and he's probably been allowed to do soccer kicks, and he's not guys out with soccer kicks. He's willing to do them. They're all over his tape. So I'd say it's a big problem for him.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. That it's obviously not ideal, but especially for a lot of newer UFC fans, like in the old days, there were only so many. You know, I'm blanking on the term, but like there was pride and stuff, and like that was allowed. So even some of like the old UFC legends, have soccer kicks and like their highlights and stuff. So newer UFC fans, I think, would probably like be in awe if they just saw him kick him in his face mid-fight. And so, I mean, I hope it doesn't happen, but I would like to see like the discourse after that happens. But yeah, it's obviously I would say not ideal. The difference in rules as well.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking the same sort of thing. Is maybe he does forget it, and we have a whole Petr Yan Aljamain Sterling incident on our hands once again. So maybe that. I'm now curious. I wonder what the odds are on a DQ.
Yeah.
Not that I expect it to happen, but you never know.
Yeah. I will off the back of that, one of the things that I think part of that points to is just his violence and aggression. Those things for Asakura, I think, are like, if he does win this fight, he's very good at doing several things on the feet. He can press you, get in your face, throw with you in the pocket. He can move backwards, look to land counters, insane knees to the head and body. Very athletic guy. So he's got dynamic shots. He can throw flying knees and things like that. Like, there's a lot of tools in the toolbox and a lot of things that make him dangerous. And out of the three guys that Pantoja has fought, whether it be the three guys that he's fought in title fights, I'd probably say that Asakura is the most likely to knock Pantoja out dead cold. With that being said, like, Pantoja is a really durable guy. We've seen him cracked multiple times. Ursag hit him with a hell of an elbow in his last fight. So I'm not sure that happens, but I just want to make sure that I acknowledge that at some point, like, this guy is dangerous to where if he knocked Pantoja out, I would not necessarily be surprised. Aside from the fact that Pantoja's durability is like very, very good. At some point in this fight, Asakura is probably going to land a shot that you'd be like, how is this guy Pantoja still alive? But violence from that Kai Asakura fella is very respectable. The hands are dangerous. The kicks are dangerous. The knees are dangerous. Not many elbows on the tape, but moving forward, moving back, lots of angles. Very dangerous striker.
That was about my actual breaking down the fight is just that Pantoja, elite grappler and all that stuff. So I think the submission will be there for sure. And like I said, I'm not 100% in like how in Asakura's defense, but I think the submission would be there for anyone Pantoja fights, but especially in this one. I didn't know that. It was interesting that Asakura has never gone 5 as well, because in James you had mentioned that too, that Pantoja had gassed before, but he, funny enough, has gone to 3 straight decisions. So I wonder, but 3 straight decisions, and he was a big finisher. So I wonder if a little bit is that him knowing he has to maybe go 5, so he's not emptying the tank as much as he had maybe when he was coming up originally. So obviously I think submission there for Pantoja, but I was going to say, I think Pantoja is extremely hittable. He gets touched up in every single fight. So if Asakura is really this next level power, he has the knockouts on his resume to back it up, then I think there is a solid chance for a finish. And what a way to come over, dethrone a champ that's defended multiple times, get a knockout, an impressive knockout, maybe a statement win, first debut fight. I think that'd be something. So that's why I am a little excited for this fight, just to see. And then I will say, like you said, though, he is extremely hittable, but he does not get knocked out. He does have a little bit of granite chin, but still like we've seen with other people before, you can only be so extremely hittable for so long before eventually it catches up with you.
Yeah, I mean, you can only take so much damage. And what, Pantoja's been in 33 MMA fights in his professional career, so there is always a chance that at this point he could get caught. He is 34, so he is just under that cursed age of 35, where we don't see anyone under 170 weight class win a title as an over 35-year-old. So he's lucky there. But I'm with you guys. I think it could very much be a knockout from Asakura, or I don't know if I even expect Pantoja to get a finish. Maybe he just grinds it out for 25 minutes, which I could see, but should be a fun fight either way.
Yeah. Two last things I want to add here. One, on the Pantoja durability and hitability side of things. I will say I think Pantoja probably wins until someone puts him out cold. I think eventually someone's going to hit him with something that's going to put him out cold, and that's what's going to end it, unless he just runs into someone who's just like nasty defensive grappling and defends for 3 rounds and slightly pieces him up on the feet. But I think the most likely outcome is this title defense eventually ends with Pantoja just getting baptized one of these times. The other thing, Asakura also hittable in the sense that he's trying to hit you, and that makes him hittable. So I will add that as well. Pantoja, not the most, this isn't Ilya Tapori out there with the hands, but I mean, he hits hard when he connects, and I think Asakura's striking defense may cause issues for him as well. So wanted to add that in there as well, that he's not exactly scotch-free on the defensive side of things. It is better than Pantoja, but that's, not really much of an accomplishment. If you're fighting Pantoja and have worse striking defense than him, you have a problem on your hands, a very serious one. So it sounds like everyone so far is on agreement with Pantoja in the main event. No one's going off into the underdog here early.
No, but I wouldn't mind seeing Asakura get it done. I think that'd be cool. Come and make your UFC debut and dethrone the 3rd longest reigning champion in the currently in the UFC. So.
Yeah, I'm not going nothing major, but probably just definitely lean in with the Pantoja pick for sure.
Yeah, that's what I feel as well. I would like to see the Asakura upset. I think that'd be fun for the division, having him as champ. So I'll probably be rooting for him come Saturday, but I do when it comes to making the pick, I'm currently lean Pantoja as well. Nothing, not calling him a lock, not saying it's completely impossible Asakura gets it done, but forced to pick is Pantoja.
Yeah, I also want to say that before we move on, did you see the latest breaking news from Dana White? About UFC 311?
Live on the show.
Live on the show. Someone sent it to me a minute ago. UFC 311 main event, Islam Makhachev and Arman Tsarukyan, with the co-main being Merab versus Umar Nurmagomedov.
That's
we're starting with a banger.
Good main and co-main right there.
So
that's the January card. So start off the year with that.
Yep.
Well, yeah, those are 2 of the bigger fights you could make right there.
Yeah, and it sounds like Garry and Jamal Hill is on that card. Kevin Holland and RDR. So what a start to the year.
Yeah, starting off the card with the banger. The boy Jamal Hill is back. Everybody hates Jamal Hill, but he's gonna knock out Garry, guys. Everybody hates him.
I know. I'm fine with him still. I'm still fine with him. I do know people dislike him a little bit, but he just needs one knockout win, and then people will be back on his side.
Oh, absolutely. That's all it is.
But I will say, thank you for throwing that in there, Jerry, because it's
pretty big news.
It's a good card right there. Starting off the year in shape. 2 title fights.
I mean, we got Peyton
top 5
Talbot.
guys. Yeah, there's some good prospects. Kevin Holland. That's how you get a UFC card right there. Title fights, a top 5 fight, and Kevin Holland.
And we also get Johnny Walker. So someone's getting knocked out in that fight.
Yeah.
Look at that. Look at that.
They're pulling out all the stops for the first part of the year.
Going back to Cali.
All right. Co-main
Oh,
event.
it's in California too.
Yeah, it's
Sorry,
Yeah,
last
LA.
thing.
it's in the Inuit
That's
though.
great because they'll have to release fighter pays too, which is amazing. So that's awesome.
Ooh, that'll be intriguing.
That is true. They also do also release hydration, so you can see how much guys rehydrate too. Which, as a former weight cutter myself, I love those numbers. So, Cali does a couple things I enjoy over there, and those are the couple
Yeah.
of them. All right. Co-main event: Ian Garry and Shavkat Rakhmonov. This was supposed to be Shavkat versus Bilal in the main event. Bilal pulls out with a toe injury. No comment from me on that one. And then Ian Garry steps in. No interim belt on the line because apparently Bilal isn't going to be out for a serious amount of time. And now we have Shavkat versus Ian Garry. Winner is going to fight for the belt. Ian Garry was originally scheduled to fight next weekend at UFC Tampa, so he's going back a week, and the opponent is changing from Buckley to Shavkat Rakhmonov. With all due respect to Joaquin Buckley, he's got a much tougher test on his hands with this matchup. But ultimately, this is 18-0 Shavkat Rakhmonov, 18 finishes versus 15-0 Ian Garry, winner fighting for a title. This is a great success story for the welterweight division in terms of building two fresh prospects. And we're going to put them in there against each other, and the winner's going to fight for the belt. So I think this fight either way is a success for the welterweight division. They're going to have one prospect, former prospect. They're actually both contenders now, but both former highly touted prospects who did not fall flat on their face, and now here they are in a number one contender. So I think it's a success story for the UFC in that regard. The betting lines for this fight have Rakhmonov as the heavy favorite, minus 375, looks like an average line, with plus 295 on the underdog, Ian Garry. Jerry, it is your turn to lead us off. What do you make of this Ian Garry and Shavkat Rakhmonov co-main event, 5 rounds, winner fighting for the title?
This works out perfectly for Bilal because I think these two guys could go to war and both end up on the sorer side of things come the new year. Maybe need some time off to recover, which leaves Bilal perfectly set up for a fight with Kamaru Usman or Colby Covington if he wins against Buckley. So I think I'm glad this fight's the one happening instead of Bilal Muhammad fighting. Would have loved to see Shavkat finish him off, but it doesn't get much better in the welterweight division. Two guys perfect. One of them 100% finish rate. And that's where I'm scared about this fight for a guy like Ian Garry because he's looked okay. And I mean, they have similar results. They both beat Neil Magny, both beat Jeff Neal, and then both beat a veteran of the game in Wonder Boy and Michael Venom Page, respectively, between Shavkat and Ian Garry. So it's similar, but like, can Ian Garry stop the takedowns? And if he can't, does he have any chance in this fight? That's my big question. That's where my head's at. Looking at his stats, he's a 69% takedown defense in the UFC. I don't know. Shavkat, on the other hand, has 29% takedown accuracy, averages a little under 1.5 takedowns per fight. I think all he needs is one in this one, and that could be the difference maker. I'm not saying I think Shavkat wins necessarily, but he seems so well-rounded, where Ian Garry is a strong striker, but hasn't had to show off this ground game. And this is something we've talked about any time it's been an Ian Garry fight week is maybe this time he's going to be up against a guy who can go on the ground, and we'll see how much of a mixed martial artist he is and not just a stand-up guy.
Yeah. I think first, like you said, I do, or like both of you have said, great, best fight to make. Unfortunate because we are hopefully not going to completely lose one of these prospects in a division that's been so depleted of any exciting fighters that are on the younger side or anything. So even though obviously one fighter has to lose, hopefully we can rebook them against maybe another old guy and then keep them, back in the mix and everything. But I think it's, shout out to Ian Garry, I guess, for stepping up on this and even taking this fight. He's a chance to, pull off the pretty big upset. But I do think overall this should be a good little fight. I'm excited. And then I was going to ask you, is this 3 rounds or 5?
5.
Okay, it is 5. Okay. So, I'll wait before we fully break it down, but I don't know. I have a feeling I do think Shavkat's the best fighter in that division. I've been rooting for him. I've been saying he's going to be champion for a while now. But just Ian Garry just has a slippery decision win written all over this upset. So that is like one of the only things that is like floating in my head. But I think this is a great co-main, great number one contender fight to close out the year for a division that's seen some change this year, and and has finally had some moving pieces in it throughout the year. So
Yeah, I'm also a fan of this fight. I kind of wish we lived in an alternate reality where Shavkat took out Bilal, Ian took out Buckley, and we just gave Ian the title fight off the Buckley win, and this was a title fight. But I am very happy this is a 5-round fight. Like in situations like this, like they were both preparing for 5 rounds. The winner is going to fight for the title. I'm not a big believer in deciding that a 3-round fight is going to determine who's going to fight in a championship fight, which is 5 rounds. I just think that's kind of silly that you can earn a 5-round fight by winning a 3-round fight. To me, that just doesn't make much sense. So I love this being a 5-round fight, and I think it makes it harder for Ian Garry to win a 5-round fight because in my mind, he's going to have to steal rounds. And what I kind of envision for an Ian Garry win is him defending takedowns enough and him being on his back foot, throwing straight shots and kind of having his back to the fence and using his footwork to kind of circle off when he needs to and just not eating a ton because Shavkat is there to be hit. The two things that I don't like in Shavkat's game are that he can be hit. He's ridiculously durable. I mean, Jeff Neal hit him with some shots. And he hit Jeff Neal back, but harder. So I'm a little concerned with Ian Garry just sitting on the outside, pot shotting a guy who doesn't have great striking defense, getting off the fence and just circling off and defending takedowns. Because Shavkat, I also don't love his takedown offense. I don't think his takedowns are that great. I think once he gets on top, he's like really, really good. But he's in this weird group of fighters that just doesn't have the elite takedowns for being an elite grappler. It's strange, but it's kind of the situation he finds himself in. I still like Shavkat because I think he's going to be much more durable. Like we've seen Shavkat get hit upside the head with a hammer by Jeff Neal, like literally hands of steel, they call him, and he ate a couple of those. And we've seen Ian Garry drop by Kenan Song. And, I just don't know if Gary's going to have the power to sit down on shots and seriously like stop Shavkat's forward pressure because Shavkat's just going to move forward and throw and throw and throw and throw more. He throws a ton and he's going to land big shots. And then once this gets to the clinch, I think Shavkat is way stronger and way better in the clinch. So I think Shavkat just mauls him in the clinch. So I don't know if this is going to be as grappling dominant as people think. I think Shavkat may win this on the feet because he's a long, big guy as well. I think he may win this off eating damage to then land more damage than what he's taking. And then if he gets to the clinch, smoking Garry in the clinch. If it gets to the point where he smoked him enough on the feet, he can start landing takedowns. And then from there, if he gets on top, it probably gets nasty. So I think Shavkat wins, and I think an Ian Garry win would be the result of a, slippery, run and jab and teep and do those types of things, which isn't necessarily going to be easy, but he'll probably try and do that and run for 25 minutes and then make it seem like he was the most technical striker of all time. So it's kind of the way I see this fight going.
We'll say one of the big benefits to Ian Garry in this fight that I don't think he's had in the past is who he's training with. He's training in Brazil. He's training with, I don't know the name of the gym, I know it's Charles Oliveira and those guys. So and I think he said, whether it's actually going to be true or not, Oliveira will be in his corner for this fight. That is massive, just for the ground aspect. That means he's been running ground defense, running takedown defense, what to do once you are on the ground, because that's my concern for him in this fight is if Shavkat gets him down, is he going to be prepared? That's a huge thing, having the UFC submission leader in your corner. See if it actually changes much, but I'm still with you, James. I think his path to victory is not getting lucky on the feet, but having kind of a perfect sequence on the feet with some counters and kind of using his kind of length because he is 2 inches taller than Shavkat, but has a 3-inch reach disparity in that instance. So we'll see how that works out, but should be a fun fight. I'm expecting some violence once again.
Yeah, and you know, with Ian Gary, sometimes with the playing on the outside the whole time, some of those fights can be a little slow, but I think Shavkat should definitely help that. I can't necessarily like I couldn't predict a full boring fight, ideally like all 5 rounds and stuff like that. So I think I lean the same way. I'm gonna probably go side with the favorite and Shavkat just because 100% finish rate. I think he has more avenues to get the finish, whether it be on the feet, on the ground and pound, with stuff. And I think I just don't know if we'll see. I mean, Gary's been good at this so far when the fighters, in the fights he's had, but I don't know if the best way to beat Shavkat would be to just kind of poke at him for 5 rounds because that just kind of seems to. And I imagine that's going to be pretty hard too, as well to keep that up for 5 rounds. So I think that's obviously going to be one of Gary's stronger ways to win the fight. I just don't know if that's going to be a super successful strategy. I guess is what I would say. But you never know too, because I mean he has some good head kicks too, and then we'll see if Shavkat if Gary's the one to crack Shavkat, that'd be pretty insane. But overall, I am excited. I even though I can see some of these rounds being a little on the outside, a little hesitant, I still overall do think it should be entertaining as well. And and then these are, like we said, the two top prospects. So even if it's not, we're hoping for violence, but even if it's not the most, barn burning, just chucking leather, still two top prospects for 5 rounds. I think it will be competitive. So can't hate on that at all.
Yeah, and I just want to add, I love the way you described that. Of it's gonna like Ian Gary pot chatting from the outside and trying to use his length. Like that's how I think he wins most likely. But I don't think it's you know it's not like it's an easy thing to go out there and do. So I 100% agree with that. Even his most plausible path to out, or his most plausible path to victory, um, still to me is like, wow, that's hard, and that's why he's a big underdog. So,
It
and
is
yeah,
one
I'm
of the
not
things,
convinced
though.
he cracks the chin.
Yeah, I was gonna say it is one of those things though with that specific type of fighting style. Is like when it does work, like we're sitting there, he just does it for 5 rounds so easily though when it comes to actual reality, and we're all sitting here like, round four, we're like, I thought Shavkat would be able to do something about it, but so that is the tough thing about those type of fighters. But I do agree with that honestly though. I think that's gonna be a tough way to win for Shav or to beat Shavkat.
Yeah. I any closing thoughts on the co-main before we take it down to Volkov and Gane?
Nothing.
All right. Um, Next fight up on the card, we've got Alexander Volkov and Ciryl Gane. Um, Interesting fight just by the landscape of the heavyweight division. These are two of the top guys, um, and you don't really know what's going on above them. All I do know is that you kind of want to be the winner and put yourself in position to where if things go left, you want to be sitting on a win, and because that puts you above the other guy in the pecking order. So if something happens, John doesn't want to fight Ciryl, and or if he doesn't want to fight Tom, and Tom gives up that belt, or excuse me, if John gives up that belt because he doesn't want to fight Tom, Tom becomes a champ, for example. You want to be the winner of this fight because you're probably fighting Tom. So like this, I don't think is a title eliminator, but in the current landscape of the heavyweight division, for these two guys, a win here is like it's a much better position to be in than coming off a loss just based off how wacky things could get. Like, who knows what the hell is going to go on with Tom and John at the top here. So, coming off a win would be important here. Um, as far as the betting odds go, betting odds like Ciryl Gane, he is minus 350 with the comeback on Volkov in the plus 260 range. So big favorite here on the Ciryl Gane side of things. Anthony, I believe it is your turn to lead us off. What do you make of this heavyweight scrap?
I love this fight. I think this is the best fight you could put on between two people not named. Well, this is just one of the best fights you could put on at this division. And I would say with someone not named John Jones and Tom Aspinall, but maybe not even John Jones, just generally Tom Aspinall. But I think, yeah, this is huge. I didn't realize they were literally 2 and 3. I think, which is good. Sometimes, I think these are probably the two best fighters in the division outside of Jones and Aspinall. Volkov was coming off that Sergey win, right? This is his last one. That was amazing. So maybe that was just kind of recency bias. I was going to look at his last couple of fights. God, heavyweights suck though. So it's like, I don't even.
It's hard
Tui,
to put together a good resume. It's like,
yeah. So when you beat someone like Sergey, who was looking like the best fighter in that division to most people, and then beat him pretty handedly like that, that was extremely impressive. So I was going to say maybe that was recency bias for me because I was a little shocked that line was so big favoring Gane. But I think what Gane's always been, as long as we've been doing this podcast, just better than everyone in the division that wasn't someone like a Ngannou or Tom Aspinall or maybe even a John Jones. He's just better than everyone in the division because he has clean striking. You don't get that from heavyweights. The next cleanest striker might be Volkov. So I think with that alone, I think this is the prettiest striking match you can find at heavyweight. So I am excited for this. I think it should be a fun one. I was interested to see what you guys have to say or hear what you have to say. But yeah, that just overall, real quick though, I was shocked a little bit hearing that line being so wide.
Yeah, I mean, I'm surprised the line is that wide as well, but God, I know who I'm pulling for, whether or not I ultimately end up picking this. There's no guy in the heavyweight division I can stand less than Ciryl Gane. I just think he's outrageous. You look at his recent stuff, and this is going to be a slight rant. He loses to John Jones in Las Vegas. He loses to Francis Ngannou. Fair enough. You lost arguably the two best guys in the division. Understandable. Then you fight in Paris and you fight Tai Tuivasa, somehow get another title shot off of that. Then you fight Sergey Spivak, also in Paris. He hasn't won a fight in the U.S. since August 2021 against Derek Lewis. I'm not saying he's a bad fighter. Ciryl Gane's a very entertaining fighter. He has very good stand-up. I want to know if his ground game's actually done anything because Volkov, why he's definitely more of a stand-up guy, he does have some submission attempts and has some submission finishes and can get you down on that ground. He is also a massive human being. He's 6'7", 250, I think he was listed at last time out. That's a big dude. He's 4 or 5 inches taller than Ciryl Gane. Whether this fight goes that way, we'll see. I think it should be violent. Should be very much on the feet unless it's kind of one of those things that Volkov feels like he needs a takedown later or see something in Ciryl Gane because Francis Ngannou, the way he beat Ciryl Gane was laying on top of him in the late rounds because there was nothing he could do about it. Too big for Ciryl Gane at that point. Didn't show any improvements in the ground game against John Jones. It is John Jones. Can't put anything that way. But I just have a feeling that Volkov's a hot fighter. Sometimes in the heavyweight division, you need to be the hotter guy. Strike first, strike fast, and we'll see what happens in this. I don't expect it to be that long of a fight.
Yeah, so I think this is a really interesting fight because they fought once. This is technically a rematch, and Gane won. And I haven't rewatched that fight. I'm still trying to figure out if I want to rewatch that fight. And the reason I say that is because it was a god-awful fight and they didn't really do much fighting. It was a lot of Ciryl Gane outside throwing and throwing straight shots and using his movement. And I'm just not, and that was a 5-round fight and it was god-awful. It was a god-awful fight. That's why I haven't already rewatched it because I remember how terribly it is vividly. So maybe I'll rewatch it. Maybe I won't. But when rematches are never the same. I've said this 100 times on this podcast in the last couple of weeks, I feel like, and every single time that has come to fruition, it's never been the same fight. Um, I've yet to say that on this podcast and then have seen a replay of the same fight. Like, it just doesn't happen. And I'm just not sure that I'm supposed to believe that Volkov has performed well since that fight. I believe, off the top of my head, Volkov lost that fight, and his only other loss since is Tom Aspinall, which, okay, like, book Tom Aspinall and Ciryl Gane, and I know who I'm picking. Like, I'm just not sure that I can be convinced that Ciryl is just going to go out there with the exact same game plan and have the exact same fight, and Volkov is just going to take it exactly the same like he did last time. I just struggled to see that. And it's not like Ciryl has been perfect. Like, his grappling sucks. Sergey Spivak was scared to fight him, so of course he couldn't take him down. He was scared in there. And I get that John Jones is John Jones, but my God, he got walked down, taken down, and gillied from top mount, basically. When was the last time you saw someone get gillied from the position that Ciryl Gane got gillied from? It hasn't happened since it happened to Ciryl Gane, because it shouldn't happen to an MMA fighter. I mean, it didn't happen to Stipe when he was in there. Like, and Stipe is 43. Stipe showed more fight than Ciryl did. Even in the grappling phases, like, he got taken down an elbow. If Ciryl got taken down an elbow, like, shit, I would have understood it. But he got taken down and mount Gailey, and he wasn't even fully mounted. He was leaning up against the fence. Like, it's crazy. So my point here with that is we've seen Gane got taken down and out grappled by Ngannou. My God, he attempted a heel hook on Ngannou from top. He's like, what are we doing out here? And I don't know how much better of a grappler he's become, but I saw Volkov go out there and land takedowns against Tuivasa. And Tuivasa can't grapple either, but we're comparing two guys who can't grapple. So he's shown the willingness to grapple someone who can't grapple. And maybe Ciryl gives you more fight than Tuivasa. Actually, he definitely will, just because Gane can move a little bit in there. So when you move, it makes it harder to grab you. But I just think that I have yeah, right. I have a lot harder of a time seeing Gane as a minus 350, knowing that 2 takedowns and the fights, that's 2 rounds Volkov. Like, I just have a very hard time just agreeing to that premise when we just talked about Shavkat at a practically identical price to Gane. And we were like, wow, the best path to victory for Shavkat, for Garry, still a tough one. And then I can just go, well, two takedowns for Volkov might be the fight. Like, there's a big difference in those two things. So I think I'm going to pick Volkov just based off the fact that I think he's been fighting well. I think he's been, doing great things. Maybe the striking, if it's 50-50, even close to that, one guy is the way better grappler. So I'll take Volkov, and if Gane wins, credit to him. But, I mean, I just kind of have to fade that grappling and just have some faith that Volkov isn't going to go out there and do the same thing he did last time out.
Nope. If Gane wins, we might finally actually see him fight for a belt once again. It'll be another interim title, I would assume, against Tom Aspinall. But nothing would give me more pleasure than watching Tom knock him out or submit him as fast as John Jones did.
Back-to-back title attempts getting submitted like in under a minute would be kind of crazy. But I do think, I do think Gane is the better striker. Like you said, it could be, because I do think Volkov's a really good striker too. It could be 50-50. I might say it might be even more 60-40, but to me, like you said, the Volkov, the takedowns, and it's more for me also just, I think they're on 2 different trajectories. I know Gane has a win in his last one, but I just think when he first came onto the scene, some of the stuff he was doing, I thought there was a peak in there at some point, and he's been kind of going down a little bit. And I just think Volkov's been looking great recently. He's doing everything he needs to do. So I think, in a rematch, I am leaning definitely to take Volkov. Just overall, because it's like you said, there's the grappling upside, and while I do think Gane is the better striker, that's not to say that Volkov also can't get this done on the feet himself as well. So overall I do like Volkov. I'm leaning Volkov. I don't know if I'll take him come whenever we make our picks, but I'm definitely leaning Volkov probably right now.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah, that's a similar spot. I mean, the last thing I was gonna do here is Volkov has been the more active guy. Since they fought, Volkov has fought 6 times, Gane 4, and two of those Gane 4 came relatively early. Gane's last fight, 2023 September in Paris. Volkov fought already this year. So just another thing I want to add is that Gane has been much more active, and you've been seeing the improvements, which
Or
I
Volkov's
like.
been much more active.
So, yeah. Did I say Gane?
Yeah.
I'd be flipping names around all the time when I start going on. But yeah, Volkov much more active and showing the improvements. So
I do want to say
those are
my one concern, because this was meant to be at 308 and it was moved to here because of a knee injury to Volkov. I'm assuming he's probably perfectly fine now, but we don't actually know. So
Mhm.
curious to see how his knee holds up in that and shit. I mean, couple leg shots from Ciryl Gane chopping down the wood. That's a big man with a lot of muscle and weight to be carrying on 1.5 legs.
Yeah, there's like 4 guys who throw leg kicks in Ciryl Gane's in the heavyweight division. Ciryl Gane is one of them. So this is not ideal.
No.
All right, let's jump over to Movsar Evloev and Aljamain Sterling. This is another really important fight. I don't know if the winner's going to fight for the title. I assume that goes to Volkanovski, but like when it comes to putting yourself in position to fight for a title at 145 pounds, this is a pretty big fight. Evloev's been rising the ranks. Sterling, former champion at 135, came up, beat Cater. Now he's looking for another one in this weight class. So, and Evloev has a win over Lopez, who is also in the discussion. I'm not sure if Lopez has jumped him, but I mean, a win over another guy you're in contention with is a nice card to have in the back pocket in this situation. So, Evloev and Sterling, I think this one is very important. Shocker, it's on the prelims. I mean, we'll talk about some of the prelims in a minute, but this is a prelim fight, and it's better than 2 of the main card fights, at least. Kron Gracie's on the main card, and it's a wild scene considering what Kron Gracie's last fight looked like. But this is, whether you want to say it's the 3rd or 4th most important fight on this card, it's in the top 5 in the 5 main card fights. So, the betting odds have it Evloev a favorite, minus 265 with the comeback on Aljamain Sterling plus 200. So the Russian Evloev is a favorite. Jerry, you can lead us off on this one. What are your thoughts on Sterling and Evloev?
I'm maybe a little surprised, and we've said it for every one of these fights we've talked about so far. We're surprised the odds are as spread apart as they are. We know Aljamain Sterling, former bantamweight champion, moved up. I think he only has the one fight under his belt at 135, and that was Calvin Kattar. This is a lot different of opponent than Calvin Kattar. This is a guy who is still 18-0, can wrestle like nobody's business, possibly one of the, if not the best grappler in this division. He looks so good at times, but it's also like he's very beatable, I will say. Diego Lopez showed that on short notice on his debut. There is a path to beating him. There was another fight where he was looking a little in trouble, but ultimately won the decision, I want to say. So he does get hit, and that's something that maybe Aljamain Sterling can get done, but I'm just not sure how his size compares, because virtually same stature, but it's very different being one of the bigger guys in your division to being like a average size guy when you move up the division. So we'll see how this fight goes.
Yeah, I think this is one of the more fun fights you could put on this division, considering you're kind of taking both the wrestlers and putting them against each other. And compared to, you could put these guys separately with some of the strikers, and you would be like, oh, well, that's not as fun, because you would probably take these guys to out wrestle the strikers. So I think it's a great way to eliminate one. And then also, like you said, the Evloev is 2 fights ago was against Lopez. Lopez has fought like 4 times since then. So that is one thing I'll say. And he fought Allen, who's a striker. So I think this is another good test, kind of like Lopez was when it comes to the grappling and department stuff. So I am excited to test Evloev against a supreme grappler like Sterling, and I think that could even end up being a good thing for Sterling to kind of truly show his level of grappling um, in a different weight class. Because the other thing with grappling too, there's different weight classes of the talent of grapplers. So overall, though, I do think, I mean, Lopez, I think it was like 3 or 4 submission attempts in that Evloev fight, and they were a couple of them were kind of close. So who knows if Sterling, they call him like the human backpack, if he's able to get on the back maybe, or do something with a submission attempt, I think he could find himself with an upset in this.
Yeah. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how this physicality looks, because the one thing that Sterling had on all of his guys at 135 was he was much more physical than them. Like, he was way bigger than Petr Yan. He was way bigger than TJ Dillashaw, even though that fight was a wash practically. But all those guys he was in there with, Corey Sandhagen, not always a length advantage, but he was a longer guy. He wasn't as long as, say, Sandhagen, for example, but he's so much physically bigger, much more muscular. So he had length and he was muscular. He had both of those things. And at 145, I'm just not exactly bought in on Sterling, because now you take that physicality away, and I'm not sure he's the same level of grappler. And now you put him in there with Evloev, who is someone I think is pretty physical. Like, he's not small for the weight class. He's fairly big for the weight class. I don't think he's humongous or anything. And the only thing we've seen from Sterling at 145 is him going out there against Kattar. And I love Kattar, but I was watching that fight like, what is going on? Kattar looked terrible. And that was Kattar coming back from injury. And Kattar has really, after the Max fight, Kattar has really only had the Giga fight where he looked good. Kattar hasn't. Like I said, I love Kattar, but he just hasn't been giving out good performances, and we've seen that camp struggle massively against grapplers. Right, he comes from the same camp as Rob Font. Rob Font went out there and got out grappled by Corey Sandhagen of all people for 25 minutes. So it's not like Calvin Kattar is some world class defensive wrestler, and Kattar wasn't even trying to counter strike. He was just stepping back, getting to the fence, and getting taken down. He wasn't even letting his cross fly. So it was a really weird fight, point being. And I'm interested to see what this looks like if they grapple. I think Evloev is more likely to get on top if they grapple. I do think Sterling is more likely to get the sub and a scramble. But there's also a part of me that, says there's a decent chance these are two wrestlers that just go out there and strike it out. And if that's the case, I'll watch one of these guys drop Arnold Allen. I haven't seen much that I like from Aljamain Sterling, on the feet. Aljamain Sterling has never been a guy that I love on the feet. And even when he was, his best fight recently where he showed anything at all that I liked on the feet was against Cejudo. Cejudo is a former 125er who was coming out of retirement for that fight. And that at that point, it's just like a rhythm and timing thing. And Sterling was way longer than him. So I think Evloev wins this one here. I think he's going to be physical and land much bigger shots in the feet, and probably spend more time on top if they grapple. I'd say the Sterling submission is probably the most likely path to victory for him, because he is a crafty jiu-jitsu guy. But I'm just not convinced he can go out there and out-wrestle him for 3 minutes. And if he doesn't for 3 rounds, if he doesn't out-wrestle him for 3 rounds, have a hard time seeing the decision come through. So it's my thought process there.
I agree with you. I think I will say, if there's going to be a finish, I think it comes from the Aljo side more likely. I think it would be a submission. I could see potentially a ground and pound maybe for one of these guys, but it's not exactly like Evloev has finishes. He hasn't finished an opponent since July 2018. So, and that was before he even came to the UFC. That was his last fight in M1. So it's been a while. Would expect a decision. I think Evloev's a better grappler. like you said, James, he's got a little bit more power and he fits this division better. He's fought some of the tougher guys in this division. I'm taking Evloev, and I think it'll be a closer fight, but it's also one of those ones that I'm like, more we dive into, the more I understand, like, okay, this is why it's on the prelims and not the main card. Is some of those main card fights, I know they're not the most exciting, but you could see a finish. You could see a knockout. You could see someone get their head rocked off. But this one just seems kind of like it's going to be 15 minutes of them wrestling, which I'm never always opposed to that, but it just doesn't seem like one that's going to catch not casual fans watching, but at the same time, it's like not exactly. There's a world where it's a very, very boring fight. This is the easiest way I put it.
Yeah, I agree, and I would want to see some elite level wrestling between the two, just some scrambles or something,
Yeah.
transitions, because I think it's there. But James said it too, and I was thinking this. I'm hoping maybe one of the rounds there is a chance. I know the wrestling counteracts, and these are stuck on the feet, which I just think that would be interesting to see because Evil goes to the ground a lot, and so does Sterling. So it's always nice to see wrestlers kind of forced to throw hands sometimes. Um, but then in saying that, that also you see how bad they are at striking, and they're like, "Oh my God, I see why you don't do this ever, and why you go to the ground." But uh, overall, I think putting, like I said earlier, putting two of the best wrestlers in the division against each other, I think is always a good idea. So I am excited to see, who comes out on top. Although I am going Evloev, leaning that way for sure.
Yeah. I just hope we get a high pace, whether it's grappling, whether it's striking. I just hope it's not, I'm going to throw 1-2, then we're going to stare at each other, and I'm going to try and think whether I want to take down, whether I want to strike. Like whether we're grappling, whether we're striking, I just want to see action. Doesn't have to be the craziest thing of all time, but if we're grappling, let's grapple. You can both grapple. Let's grapple. Let's not just, push each other to the fence. If we're striking, go out there and try and knock the other dude out. That's my hope for this one in an ideal scenario. All right. Final thoughts. Plenty final thoughts to pick from throughout this card. And we don't have to go super in depth on these, but there's plenty to talk about. So don't feel like you got to cut yourself short if you have a decent amount to say on a fight. Anthony, I believe it is your turn to lead us off. You got a final thought that sticks out to you, whether it's one, multiple, however you want to do it. You can lead us off on this one.
I'll pick two, and then I'll kind of leave the third one up for someone else to pick up on. I was kind of starting on the early prelims. Clay Guida, Chase Hooper. I know we all kind of always like talking Chase Hooper. Super, what to say? Fun fighter. I'll give him fun fighter too. His fights are always entertaining in some way, whether that's him getting teed off on, him coming up doing grappling submissions and that fight. Just an entertaining person too to go along with that. And then Clay Guida, veteran. Let's see. I was saying he's lost his last two by decision. Not quite Jim Miller level exciting veteran, but a veteran in his own rights. Had some good fights in his day. So that's just the first one with one old guy, one newer guy. Names regardless of their age though, and that could be a nice little one, especially second up on the card. The other one, Michael Chiesa, Max Griffin. I like Max Griffin. Sacramento, Northern California guy. I was surprised this fight doesn't pick him. Chiesa must be getting a lot of credit for beating Tony Ferguson. Or people just don't think Max Griffin's that good anymore. I think he's shown enough with his hands, with his striking, to where you should think that Chiesa will get knocked out in this fight. But maybe they're worried about the submission game from Chiesa locking up another one. But yeah, I was just surprised. I thought Chiesa's last fight was going to be Ferguson. I thought he was nearing kind of retirement, but I guess he got the win, so he gets to go again. Just another, once again, old veteran, newer guy, two more names. And then the fight, one I am truly excited for, and I'll leave this up for you guys as well to speak on, is the Dominic Reyes-Anthony Smith fight. Anthony Smith, extremely popular person. on this podcast, Dominic Reyes gets talked about a frequent amount too, with being on the total downhill slide after the Jones fight, and now finding himself a little bit with a win. Looked pretty good too. So this is generally when you lose 4 fights in a row and then you win a fight after that. This is the true Anthony Smith test as well, because after 4 losses in a row, I think 4 KOs too, it was maybe call it quits time. So he took time off, gathered himself, got a win. Now he gets the Anthony Smith test, and I think that's storybook right there. So I'm super excited for this fight, and obviously the UFC is excited for it too because it is the main event of the prelims.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna lead off with that one because on a more somber note, I feel like Anthony Smith. I don't know if you guys saw, lost his coach, and I think it was his coach passed away around the time of the last fight. So this will be the first time he's going to fight week without his coach, who was one of his best friends, all that stuff. So feel sorry for him. Prayers up to his family, but I wonder how that's going to affect his mindset going into this because Dominic Reyes, like you said, sure he lost 4 in a row, but he's still a dangerous guy, and that's a lot. That's a heavy head to hold up for Anthony Smith. But also, hell of a story if he comes out and gets the win. And who doesn't love a good old-fashioned Anthony Smith test on this show? But the other ones I want to mention, just going off one of yours again, the Chase Hooper one is hilarious to me. I just did some research preparing for the final thoughts. This is the second biggest age gap between 2 fighters in UFC history. 17 years and 9 months. Clay Guida debuted in MMA professionally in 2003. Chase Hooper was born in 99. So he was 4 years old when he debuted. We'll also say they fought in grappling. They fought in like submission grappling, and Chase Hooper ultimately won that back in December 2022. So maybe we get a third fight in bare knuckle boxing or something down the road if we see a win.
Trio.
Yeah. And then the other one I wanted to touch on, mostly just one fighter, but I'm curious to see how Kennedy Nzechukwu does in his second UFC heavyweight fight, because first one was against Chris Barnett. It looked like Barnett hurt himself in the pre-fight excitement, jumping up and kind of landed on his ankle weird. So who is he fighting? Why am I blanking on the name?
Lukasz Bresky.
Yes. Yeah, Bresky. He's a minus 600 favorite, Kennedy Nzechukwu is, at least according to the UFC website. So clearly there's thoughts here, but I'm curious to see how he actually looks against a truer heavyweight in this division.
Yeah, Bresky is at least a guy who can win fights at heavyweight. So that's like, if you're not good enough to be a UFC heavyweight, you'll lose to Bresky. So it's kind of similar to an Anthony Smith test. And since we mentioned the Anthony Smith test, which I'm excited about as well, that's a fight I like. I'll also mention we can finish that Chase Hooper and Clay Guida trilogy in Karate Combat. So that covers our 2 bases today for the mentions. So
that's a good one.
We'll get those out of the way.
Bingo.
Our 2 favorite topics on this show, if you haven't realized: Karate Combat and Anthony Smith.
Yeah, it's been a great episode. We got to trash Ciryl Gane, which I personally love doing. Yeah,
he would rather fight for a belt against John Jones again than fight against Tom Aspinall for the interim title.
Yeah, you are. That is correct. All right. My final thoughts here. There's quite a few fights I like on this card. I'm a big Josh Van guy. Him fighting Cody Durden, I think that's a good fight. I keep a close eye on Van because I've been impressed so far. I think he's got a little bit more flaws than I originally was kind of expecting.
Oh, we might have lost him.
Oh, no.
We'll say he was on the Joshua Van pick.
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay.
Van.
I will, because we still do have a handful of fights.
Oh,
so the other ones, real quick, because I know at least the 2 other ones you might want to talk about.
Yeah.
So just to, actually, we could finish it out with or at least talk about the other ones a little bit, was the Bryce Mitchell Kron Gracie.
Yeah.
We joked about that, as in we don't really know why that is on the main card, but Kron Gracie, last name is a Gracie. did not look great in his last fight, but I do think they found him opponent at Bryce Mitchell. Not a lot of striking. So that one at least could maybe be a fun, complete jiu-jitsu grappling fest. And so I could see that one being super entertaining in that way.
Yeah, that's another one similar to like what we were saying about the Evloev and Aljo fight is like that could be some high level grappling. This could be some very high level jujitsu. We'll see how Bryce Mitchell is because last time we saw him fight just under a year ago, I thought we might have seen a guy deceased on the.
That was the Josh Emmett.
Yep, that was his last fight. Was the Josh Emmett one? So we'll see if he's actually recovered and knows where he is this time, and if he can manage to avoid a big hand. But
okay,
he's back. Welcome back.
There you go. We knew some of the other ones you want to talk about, so we just got the Bryce Mitchell one out the way. But if you want to go back to the Van pick,
sorry, fellas, the computer tends to crash occasionally when I switch tabs, and it loves to happen while we're recording the podcast. So it's great timing. Josh Van, big Josh Van fella. Think he's got a little bit more flaws than I originally was hoping for. But he's still young in the game, and now I'm buffering. Great way to end the show.
Bruce.
Couple other ones: Brian Battle and Randy Brown. Brian Battle and Randy Brown is a big one that I'll be pumped for. Think that's a sensational fight. Winner probably gets a ranked opponent. I think both of them should have probably got a ranked opponent to begin with. So two guys where if you were to extend those top 15, you're probably looking at 16, 17, or 17 or 18. So two very, very good guys and two guys who have consistently impressed me. So when you book them against each other, I can't help but be optimistic in a good fight. Last one, I'll shout out Nate the Train against Duho Choi. That one's starting off the main card. I don't think it's the most high-level fight you'll ever see, but Nate the Train knows how to put on a show, and so does Duho Choi. He's already in the Hall of Fame for in the fight wing for his fight with Cub Swanson, I believe. Yeah, he is. So, I mean, that screams good fight. So,
yeah, I think like we kind of discussed before, overall, pretty great card. I would say maybe not front loaded with like two title fights or anything, but truly the fact that we were able to talk about a fight or multiple fights in the early prelims, and even the two lower main card fights. Maybe it's lacking the great fights, but there's not really a bad fight on this entire card. So that is always, as we complain to the UFC about just putting on semi-entertaining fights or fights that sound entertaining, I think they delivered wholeheartedly on this card.
Oh yeah, I mean, I just wanted to throw one more shout out to the Vicente Luque Themba Gorimbo fight. That could be. I want to say there hasn't been another fighter from Zimbabwe in the UFC before. Could be very wrong on that. The UFC website was slacking when I was trying to look up fighters from Zimbabwe. Who would have thought that? But if he wins over Vicente Luque, I think he will become the first ranked UFC fighter ever from Zimbabwe. So that's something to fight for. That could be an entertaining fight. Probably going to be a better fight than what was it, Nick Diaz and Vicente Luque.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I believe Vicente Luque may be washed. I hope not, because he's a fun guy. Please don't be washed, Vicente. Please. Yeah, but this end of the stream here has been a rough one for me. Also, and the last thing I was going to say on that is, like you said, Anthony, I think it's a good, solid card for a card that even had a title fight get canceled. So we even had that, and like you said, the top of the bill wouldn't have been tremendous even if we had Bilal on it. That's just unfortunately, I mean, it's Bilal. But I think this is the base of this card is pretty solid, and that's you're going to spend more time watching those fights than you are the main event. Obviously, would prefer to end the year of the pay-per-view schedule with a crown jewel on the top, but just isn't the way the pay-per-view schedule fell after having, John Jones last pay-per-view and some previous pay-per-views before that being really solid ones. So it's a solid pay-per-view to end the year off with. And next week, I think the Fight Night card is going to be good. I know there's been some movements. A couple fights have been canceled, but
I'll be on the.
looks like
the,
it's going to be a good one, barring changes.
I will be at that fight, so hopefully it is an entertaining one, but
Yes.
we shall see.
Yeah, they stole Mackenzie Dern from you, unfortunately. What a shame.
What was it? Mackenzie Dern and Amanda Hebos now moving to the first fight card of the year.
Yeah.
Damn. Oh well.
Sell the tickets.
Colby Covington. Can he actually beat a still active fighter? Is the question.
No, he cannot. Actually, I already bet Buckley, so no, he cannot. So thank you to everyone for tuning in, and thank you for sticking through the last 10 minutes of the show or so when my computer just decided it needed to take a crash. So thank you for sticking through that, and thank you for sticking through us talking about fights. And it's good to be back. We'll be back next week as well, and we'll figure out something for the time off. Obviously, we won't be here every week with the holidays for the little time off, but we'll figure out a way to get an episode or two out in that break period for the UFC. So thank you for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. Make sure to sub to Vendetta Sports Media. Make sure to go to vendettasportsmedia.com. And thank you. We will see you next week.